She was days away from her wedding, a beloved teacher in her community. But on Easter Sunday 2015, Stephanie Scott walked into Leeton High School and never walked out. The tragic murder of Stephanie Scott. On the morning of April 5, 2015, Stephanie Scott, a bright, compassionate 26-year-old teacher, walked into Leeton High School in rural New South Wales. The halls were quiet. It was Easter Sunday. Most staff were home with their families, but Stephanie had something else on her mind. She was preparing lesson plans for her substitute teacher. She was due to go on leave, not for vacation, but for something much more exciting. She was getting married that week. Her fiancé, Aaron, was already making final arrangements for their honeymoon. The couple had been together for years. Their wedding was planned for Saturday. Stephanie was organized, reliable, and deeply loved by her students and peers. So when she didn't return home that evening, alarms went off almost instantly. Her family reported her missing by nightfall. At first, police treated it as a routine disappearance. Maybe she'd gone to see a friend. Maybe she was taking some quiet time before the big day. But Stephanie Scott wasn't the kind of person to vanish without a word, especially not 6 days before her wedding. By the next morning, Leeton was gripped by fear. Volunteers combed the bushland. Police canvassed the area. Her car was nowhere to be found, and inside the school, where she was last seen, nothing seemed out of place. But someone had been there with her, and soon, investigators would find something deeply disturbing. The investigation unfolds. When police searched Leeton High School, they found Stephanie's red Mazda parked where she'd left it. The car was locked. Her belongings were still inside, but there was no trace of Stephanie herself, no signs of a struggle, no blood, no broken glass. It was as if she had walked into the building and simply vanished. Detectives started reviewing school access logs and CCTV footage. One name stood out: Vincent Stanford, a 25-year-old night cleaner employed through a third-party contractor. He was quiet, solitary, and rarely interacted with teaching staff. Most barely knew him, but what caught investigators' attention wasn't just his presence, it was his behavior. According to statements later made public, Stanford had left the school abruptly after Stephanie's arrival, and when officers knocked on his door, they noticed something even more unsettling. He seemed calm, eerily calm. Inside his home, officers found burnt items, a camera with deleted images, and, most disturbingly, a blood-stained engagement ring. Vincent Stanford was arrested on April 8, 2015, just 3 days after Stephanie disappeared. During the police interview, he spoke without remorse. He described seeing Stephanie and being overwhelmed by what he later called a compulsion. He said, and this is a direct quote, "I went a little nuts. I had this feeling inside me that I had to kill her." He said he didn't know her. It was random, senseless, fast. He had attacked her inside the school and, in a calm, clinical tone, admitted to the entire crime. The public was stunned. The idea that someone like Vincent Stanford, barely noticed by most, had harbored such violent impulses shook the small town of Leeton to its core. And still, there were more horrifying details to come. The crime details. The full horror of what Vincent Stanford had done would only emerge after his chilling confession. On the morning of April 5th, 2015, Stephanie Scott had entered an empty school to finalize lesson plans before taking time off for her honeymoon. She had been alone, the perfect target for what Stanford later admitted was a premeditated, fantasy-driven attack. Stanford ambushed Stephanie in one of the school's staff rooms, striking her repeatedly and sexually assaulting her. In his own words, he said the attack escalated until he stabbed her in the neck, killing her almost instantly. After the murder, Stanford acted methodically. He placed Stephanie's body in the boot of his car and drove nearly 70 kilometers northeast to the remote Cocopera National Park, a rugged and isolated stretch of bushland. There, in an attempt to destroy evidence, he set her body on fire, using accelerants he had purchased just days earlier. Investigators later found charred remains, personal items, and remnants of a fire pit. DNA confirmed the worst. It was Stephanie. Her life had been taken, and then her body desecrated. all in an effort to erase the crime. The cruelty, the cold planning, the lack of any motive beyond a sudden violent impulse, it was almost incomprehensible. The randomness of it left both the community and investigators reeling, but the question still lingered. Could this have been prevented? The perpetrator's background. To understand the brutal murder of Stephanie Scott, investigators had to look beyond the act itself and into the mind of the man who committed it. Vincent Stanford, just 25 years old at the time of the crime, had no previous criminal record in Australia. On the surface, he appeared to be a quiet, introverted cleaner working at Leeton High School, but that facade masked a deeply disturbed past. Stanford's psychological issues stretched back decades. Born in Australia, he spent part of his childhood in the Netherlands, where in 2003 he was expelled from school following a violent outburst toward a teacher, a red flag that would later haunt those who had contact with him. During interviews and later psychological evaluations, Stanford chillingly admitted that he had experienced violent urges from the age of 7 or 8. He described graphic fantasies of killing, and even said that murder had fascinated him for years. Experts who assessed him post-arrest noted that while Stanford did not meet the criteria for psychopathy or schizophrenia, he showed signs of severe emotional detachment. He was described as isolated, socially withdrawn, and lacking empathy. Investigators also uncovered disturbing online activity. Stanford had searched for violent content, studied crime scenes, and frequently browsed forums related to death and gore. He'd even taken photos of Stephanie on the morning of her murder, images found stored on his phone alongside snapshots of the crime scene. What made the case all the more chilling was that there was no personal connection between Vincent Stanford and Stephanie Scott. The attack, he confessed, was completely random. He'd seen her, and an uncontrollable urge had taken over.
On seeing her, what did you feel?
That I had to kill her. I wasn't angry or anything.
The question now turned from why to how was this missed? The legal proceedings. The wheels of justice turned quickly in one of Australia's most harrowing murder cases. On July 14, 2016, Vincent Stanford stood before the New South Wales Supreme Court, where he formally pleaded guilty to 2 charges: aggravated sexual assault and the murder of Stephanie Scott. His confession left little doubt. During police interviews, Stanford gave graphic, emotionless details of the crime, from the moment he ambushed Stephanie at school to the chilling drive to Kokopara National Park. He showed no remorse, and investigators described him as disturbingly calm throughout. Then, on October 13, 2016, Justice Robert Allen Hume handed down a sentence that reflected the gravity of the crime: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, emphasizing that Stanford posed an ongoing threat to society. The court was particularly disturbed by Stanford's lack of empathy, his premeditation, and his complete absence of remorse. For Stephanie's family, it was a legal victory, but no true justice could ever undo what was taken. The sentence may have closed a chapter in court, but it could not heal the heartbreak left behind, aftermath, and impact. The shock of Stephanie Scott's murder rippled far beyond her family. Her fiancé, Aaron Leeson Woolley, was left shattered, just days away from what was meant to be their wedding. Instead of celebrating, he was identifying her remains. The emotional toll on her family was immense, described by those close to them as a grief too deep for words. In Leeton, the town where Stephanie had taught and inspired so many students, the atmosphere turned from celebration to sorrow. Vigils were held, classrooms fell silent, and the entire region paused to grieve the loss of a bright, compassionate teacher who had touched so many lives. Stephanie's case also sparked national conversations around workplace safety. Schools and institutions across Australia began re-examining their background checks and hiring protocols, especially for contract and cleaning staff. The tragedy highlighted just how vulnerable even our safest spaces can be, and the urgent need for stronger protective measures. How could such a tragedy have been prevented? What warning signs were missed? And what systems failed to protect her? As we reflect on Stephanie Scott's heartbreaking story, we ask you, what measures should be in place to ensure safety in our schools and workplaces? Could stronger screening or earlier intervention have saved her life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear your voice. Next episode, she vanished from a church just steps from her home. Weeks later, her body was found miles away in a frozen lake. What really happened to Joanne Roman?